I'm here with Darryl James, author, publisher, journalist, and filmmaker. He's releasing his book, Becoming Diddy, The Making of John Combs from Mogul to Monster, a book about Sean John Diddy Combs, who is in prison awaiting trial for sex trafficking, racketeering, conspiracy, and transportation to engage in prostitution. Can you talk about like what led to you writing that book?
For those who don't know, I ran the second largest rap music publication, Rap Sheet. We launched it in 1992. I was also the editor producer of the Hip Hop Countdown, which was a nationally syndicated rap radio show. And so I was really, really active as a journalist during the 90s. And so I was around this guy and I kind of watched his development. And I never thought that he was a good person. Towards the end of the 90s, I knew he was a bad person because Biggie died broke. And so in the 2000s, I started watching all the weird stuff that was coming from his camp, especially when I started hearing about the freak offs. So by the time he started getting in trouble, I guess the thing that really set it off was when he did the settlement for Cassie, because at that point everybody was looking for their check, and that's when I started taking notes and looking at everything and researching, and I started interviewing people, and then I decided to put it together and do a book.
Most definitely. I feel like, with Sean Diddy, like Combs, like everything now has, because he's such a hot topic in the news, there's so much like where you don't know how to separate the facts from the rumors sometimes. Like, what was the dividing line of like what to include in the book, what to exclude?
So for me, the only sources I used were sources that I could actually verify. Initially, I found like three or four of the alleged victims. And I say alleged not to disrespect them, but I couldn't verify.
Yeah.
And initially, I was going to use one of them, but she started saying really crazy stuff that I was like, I don't know. She started kind of looking like Jaguar Wright,
Right.
which in Jaguar she has said so much. 50% of what she said is probably true, but the other 50 is just so outlandish. She sounds like a kook. So I definitely didn't want to include her. So I used a lot of my own sources that I found. I have an attorney who put everything in a legal perspective. I have a pastor who has a PhD in theology who really dealt with the whole aspect of Diddy calling himself Brother Love for a while, claiming to be a Christian. He's going to do a Christian rap album, that kind of thing. I wanted a hip hop rap music executive, so I used my friend Lonzo Williams, who did the World Class Wrecking Crew with Dre. I had a psychologist evaluate him. Basically, not really. She couldn't diagnose him because she doesn't really know him. But so these are the sources, and then I had two confidential sources who worked with him. One actually worked for him, but they didn't want to say their names, but they were very, very credible. So I got information from them too. So that's what I dealt with.
You mentioned him wanting to do a Christian rap album, and part of the book you talk about him promoting God as part of his lifestyle. And obviously, like, he had this relationship with TD Jakes, and he's alleged to have been in the freak offs. I was wondering, like, what was your conclusion on that topic? Was he involved? Was TD Jakes just his pastor mentoring him, or was he actually involved in these freak offs?
I'm pretty sure he was involved in the freak offs. I've got my opinion, but again, this book was, pure journalism. It was investigative reporting, so I couldn't confirm it. So I didn't even mention it. But you're asking me, and this isn't the book. Yeah, they were calling TD Jakes a power bottom, you know, and I had to figure out what that is, and that's like some homosexual stuff where you like being on the bottom. So I really believe that the Jakes was in it, because there's that video where a guy is kind of like twerking and Jakes is all excited behind him looking at him. So I'm like, yeah, that's what time it was.
Definitely, like you mentioned, like, being like, a journalist in the 90s and knowing, like, at that time that Diddy wasn't like, a good person. Why do you feel it took so long for like, him to be exposed? there's a lot of like, rumors like, that basically his lawsuit against Diageo, like, was the reason like, that these came to light. Do you feel like, that was like, part of like, why like, he's being exposed now?
Sure, sure. I definitely think that was a huge part of it. When I first heard that, I was like, get out of here with that bullshit because that's what they were like saying with Cosby. Oh, he's going to buy NBC. It may or may have not been true. They said, oh, they killed Michael Jackson because he wanted his masters. They want, I don't really follow a lot of conspiracy theories, but then I did speak to someone credible, and it makes sense because it's not that Diageo caused it. It's that they basically he accused them of racism and they were like, well, what can we do to retaliate? And so they started trying to do their own investigation, and then they alerted the feds, and then the feds started investigating. And the thing that really triggered it all was Cassandra Ventura,
Right.
when she sued Puffy. Diddy, whatever that punk's name is, he settled the very next day. That triggered all the people who wanted their check. So at that point, it was a money grab. But now the feds were able, they're like, oh, we got all these witnesses. So now we can put together this whole thing so that we can go in, raid his home,